He told her she was nothing without him. As they signed the final papers, he leaned in and whispered, "Have fun on the bus, Alice. I hope that settlement covers your rent for at least a month." He laughed, adjusting the cufflink on his $5,000 suit, and walked out to his new life. She stood alone on the curb, defeated. But the car that pulled up to the curb wasn't a taxi. And the man who stepped out to open her door wasn't just anybody. In that single second, her ex-husband's world built on arrogance and lies came crashing down. The air in the Harris County family courthouse smelled like stale coffee and cheap disinfectant. It was the scent of endings, and for Alice Hayes, it was an odor she'd become sickeningly familiar with. She sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly around a worn leather portfolio. She wore her only suit, a simple navy blue set from a department store. It was 3 years old, but clean and pressed. It was the suit she'd bought for the interview she thought she was going to have before Mark convinced her that his career at Goldman Sachs needed to be the priority. "One of us has to support the other," he'd said, smiling that winning smile that once charmed her. "And let's be honest, darling, my bonus potential is a little higher than your art history degree." So she'd supported. She'd managed their home, hosted his insufferable clients, and edited his reports, shrinking her own world until it fit inside the luxury condo he paid for. The heavy door to the hallway swung open and he appeared. Mark Anderson. He wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was Chloe, the 24-year-old paralegal he'd sworn was just a friend. Chloe's blonde hair was immaculate, her white suit aggressively bright in the drab hallway. She carried a $10,000 Hermes Birkin bag, a bag Alice recognized. It was the one she'd pointed out in a window 6 months ago, just before she found the hotel receipts. Mark spotted Alice. His face, which she had once loved, twisted into a smirk of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "Alice, darling," he boomed, letting his voice echo. People turned to look. "I almost didn't recognize you. Are you okay? You look tired." Alice stood, refusing to be looked down upon. "Hello, Mark. Chloe." Chloe gave her a pitying smile that was more insulting than a slap. "Alice, I'm so glad this is all finally getting settled. It must be such a relief for you." "Mr. Anderson," Mark's lawyer, a shark named Graves, interrupted. "Room 3B, we're on the docket." Mark nodded, but his eyes stayed locked on Alice. He leaned in as if sharing a secret, though he spoke just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Seriously, Al, you should have taken the first offer. This whole song and dance in court? It's just sad." "I just want what's fair, Mark," Alice said, her voice barely a whisper. "Fair." He laughed. "Fair is what I built. You were just there. Did you really think the judge would give you half for what, arranging flowers?" He adjusted his silk tie, a brilliant, obnoxious blue. "Look, I've got to run. Big meeting after this. The condo is being listed Monday. Chloe and I are moving to the new place in River Oaks. But don't worry." He patted his breast pocket. "Your little settlement check is all ready to go. Don't spend it all in one place. Maybe a nice studio apartment near the bus line." He and Chloe swept past, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and mockery in their wake. Alice felt her face burn, but she refused to cry. She'd done all her crying in the lonely apartment she'd been renting for 6 months, the one paid for by selling the last of her grandmother's jewelry. Inside the courtroom, it was worse. Mark's lawyer painted her as a bitter, lazy wife who contributed nothing. Mark on the stand listed his assets, his promotions, his long hours. He generously offered her a one-time payout of $50,000. "She has no claim to my bonuses or my portfolio," Mark stated calmly. Ms. Hayes hasn't worked in 5 years. She has no concept of what it takes to earn at my level." When the judge, looking bored, finally stamped the papers, the gavel felt like a hammer blow to Alice's chest. It was done. She was divorced. She was free. And she was by Mark's metrics worthless. He knew it. As they filed out, he walked past her and didn't even look at her. He just said one final thing. "Good luck, Alice. You're going to need it." Alice walked out of the courthouse into the bright, humid Houston sunlight. The light felt abrasive, too, revealing. She clutched her portfolio, the $50,000 settlement feeling like 50,000 pieces of pity. It wouldn't last 6 months, not after she paid her lawyer. She heard them before she saw them, Mark and Chloe laughing as they bounded down the courthouse steps. "Dinner at Uchi tonight, baby," Mark said, pulling Chloe close and kissing her. "We're celebrating." "Oh, look," Chloe said, pointing with her chin. "She's still here." Alice was standing on the curb, her phone in her hand, trying to open the Uber app. Her hands were shaking. Mark strode over, his smile gone, replaced by a final look of condescension. "What's the matter, Alice?" "Can't get a signal. You know, for a $50,000 payout, you could probably afford a taxi. Or is that too much of a splurge?" Alice said nothing. She just stared ahead, focusing on the traffic. "God, you're pathetic," he hissed. "Look at you. You're a ghost. I did you a favor, Alice. I set you free. Now you can go back to whatever it is you did before you met me. Working in that dusty second-rate gallery." "Mark, leave her alone," Chloe said, not out of kindness but out of impatience. "Let's just go. My feet are hurting." "In a second, baby." Mark was enjoying this. This was his final victory. "I just want to see her off. Make sure she gets to her new life safely. Hope you brought a bus pass, Alice." He was about to say more when a car turned the corner. It wasn't just a car. It was a shadow. A silent, impossibly sleek piece of engineering that made Mark's brand-new BMW 7 Series parked down the street look like a child's toy. It was a Bugatti Veyron painted in a matte midnight black that seemed to drink the sunlight. It moved with a predator's grace and pulled to a stop directly in front of Alice. Mark and Chloe froze. Holy. Mark breathed, his eyes wide. He knew cars. He knew that this vehicle was worth more than his condo. "Who the hell is that?" They stared, assuming it was for a judge or a visiting politician. Then the driver's side door opened. The man who stepped out was not a chauffeur. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal gray suit so perfectly tailored it looked more like an extension of his body than clothing. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face was sharp, angular, and utterly impassive. He radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. Mark knew that face. He'd seen it on the cover of Forbes. He'd seen it in the Wall Street Journal. It was Damian Sterling, the ghost of Wall Street, the recluse tech and logistics billionaire. A man rumored to be worth over $50 billion. A man whose company Sterling Industries was a major client of Goldman Sachs. Mark's blood turned to ice. His mouth went dry. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Damian Sterling didn't look at Mark. He didn't look at Chloe. He didn't acknowledge their existence. He walked calmly around the front of the Bugatti and stopped directly in front of Alice. He reached out and, with a gentleness that seemed utterly at odds with his formidable presence, opened the passenger door. "Alice," he said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the street noise like a scalpel. "Is this resolved?" Alice finally looked up, her expression calm. The trembling in her hands had stopped. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. It is finalized." "Good," he said. He glanced at her simple portfolio. "Did you bring the files on the Rotterdam acquisition?" "They're in my bag, sir," she replied. "Excellent. We have a flight to Geneva. The auction at Sotheby's is tomorrow, and I want to review the provenance on that lost Picasso one more time before we commit." He held the door for her. Alice paused and for the first time turned to look at Mark. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked indifferent. It was the look one might give a stranger who had bumped into them in a crowd. She gave him a single small nod. "Goodbye, Mark." She slid into the low-slung seat of the Bugatti. Damian Sterling closed the door with a soft, expensive thud. He walked back to the driver's side. Only then, just before getting in, did he finally let his gaze fall on Mark. His eyes were steel gray. He looked at Mark for precisely 1 second. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of complete and total dismissal. It was the look a king might give a court jester who had just told a bad joke. Then he got in the car. The engine, which had been nearly silent, growled to life, a deep thrumming sound of pure power. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic, leaving Mark and Chloe standing in its exhaust. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice high and shaky. Mark. Who was that? How does she know? Who was that? Mark was frozen. His face was chalk white. The smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of dawning, sickening horror. That, he stammered, his $5,000 suit suddenly feeling like a cheap rental. That was Damian Sterling. 6 months earlier, Alice had been sleeping on her sister's sofa, surrounded by boxes of what was left of her life. Mark had been brutal. The moment she confronted him about Chloe, he hadn't just been defensive. He'd been offensive. He froze their joint accounts, hired graves, and had her served with divorce papers before she'd even packed a bag. He claimed irreconcilable differences and financial abandonment, stating she was a drain on his assets. She was broken. The woman who had graduated top of her class in art history and curation from Yale, who had been the most promising junior curator at the Halcyon Gallery in New York before Mark moved them to Houston for his career, was now applying for jobs as a barista. One night, scrolling through obscure high-level job boards, she found a posting. It was anonymous, posted by a private recruitment firm. Wanted private collection manager and asset curator. Must have expert knowledge in 17th century Dutch masters, postmodern sculpture, and identification of high-level forgeries. Must be willing to travel internationally 80% of the time. Must be able to pass an exhaustive background check and sign a lifetime non-disclosure agreement. Discretion is paramount. Is salary. Non-negotiable and substantial. It was a fantasy. A job for someone with decades of experience. Alice, on a whim fueled by desperation and a glass of cheap wine, sent in her old resume along with a scathing but brilliant analysis she'd written on a recently discovered Vermeer that she was certain was a fake. She didn't expect a reply. She got one 2 hours later. An email. Be at this address tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your passport. The address was a nondescript glass tower downtown. The elevator required a key card which a silent guard provided. She was led into a penthouse office that was empty save for a desk, 2 chairs, and a single painting on the wall. Damian Sterling was standing in front of it. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't shake her hand. He just pointed at the painting, a chaotic, beautiful piece in the style of Jackson Pollock. I paid $22 million for this at a private auction last year, he said, his voice as quiet as it had been on the courthouse steps. It was authenticated by the artist's estate. Tell me about it. Alice looked. She really looked. She walked closer, examining the canvas, the paint spatter, the signature. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. It's beautiful, she said finally. I didn't ask if it was beautiful, Sterling replied, his back still to her. It's a forgery, Alice said. He turned. His eyes narrowed. Explain. The Pollock method is about controlled chaos. This is just chaos. The drip patterns are wrong. They're too hesitant in places, too aggressive in others. But the real proof, she pointed to a tiny corner, is the paint. That's titanium white. But it's an acrylic-based titanium, not the oil-based casing he used during this period. This was painted probably in the 1980s, not 1950. Sterling stared at her. His face was unreadable. He walked to his desk and pressed a button on his intercom. Send in Mr. Vance. A moment later, a flustered-looking man in an expensive suit rushed in. Sir, Mr. Vance, this is Ms. Hayes. She has just identified the Pollock as a fake. Mr. Vance laughed nervously. Sir, with all due respect, my team at Sotheby's authenticated that. It's impossible. Ms. Hayes, Sterling interrupted. What did you say about the paint? It's acrylic-based titanium white, Alice said, her voice steady. His was casein. You can run a simple mass spectrometry on it. I'll stake my reputation on it." "Vance," Sterling said, "have the lab do it. Now, if she's right, you're fired." Mr. Vance went pale and scrambled out of the room. Sterling turned back to Alice. "You're divorced?" he asked. Alice flinched. "It's in process." "Your husband is Mark Anderson at Goldman Sachs," Sterling stated. It wasn't a question. "He's a portfolio manager, over-leveraged in his personal life and thinks he's smarter than he is. He's cheating on you with his paralegal." Alice was speechless. How did you know that?" "I don't tolerate fools, Miss Hayes. And I don't hire people I haven't thoroughly investigated. The background check was comprehensive." He tapped his desk. "Your analysis of the fake Vermeer was correct. My team came to the same conclusion last week. It took them 3 months. It took you 1 night." He walked to the window. "I own the largest private art collection in the world. It's a liability. It's an asset. And it's full of snakes like Vance telling me what I want to hear. I need someone who tells me the truth, even if it costs me $22 million. He turned. "You start today. The job pays $1 million a year plus expenses. You will answer only to me. Your first task is to go through my entire collection piece by piece and find every other mistake Mr. Vance made. My car is waiting downstairs to take you to your new apartment. Sign the NDA on the desk." That was 4 months ago. 4 months of 18-hour days flights to Zurich, Tokyo, and Paris. 4 months of rediscovering the razor-sharp intellect she had buried to make Mark comfortable. She wasn't his mistress. She was his most valuable and most trusted asset manager. The $50,000 settlement wasn't a lifeline. It was an insult, and Mr. Sterling, who despised being insulted almost as much as he despised being lied to, had insisted on picking her up from the courthouse himself. Mark didn't go to Uchi. He didn't go back to the office. He went to the River Oaks condo, his condo, and poured a glass of Macallan 25. He drank it in one go. "Mark, you're scaring me," Chloe said, pacing the marble floor. "Who was she with? You said she was broke. You said she was nothing." "He's a client," Mark mumbled, pouring another. "He's not just a client. He's the client. Sterling Industries has half their liquid assets managed by our Houston office. He's Damian Sterling. The billionaire, the one who owns that island." Chloe's eyes went wide, but not with fear, with calculation. "So, she's his girlfriend. She left you for a billionaire?" "No!" Mark shouted, slamming the glass down. "She didn't leave me. I left her. She got lucky. She must have, I don't know, met him at a bar. She's a gold digger. That's all this is." But his words sounded hollow even to him. The Alice who stepped into that car wasn't the mousy, apologetic woman he'd kicked out. She was cold, she was confident, and she was working. "Geneva. Sotheby's. The Rotterdam acquisition." He stormed into his home office and booted up his computer. He pulled up the internal Goldman database. He searched for Sterling Damian. His file was practically empty. "Client level Zeus, eyes only, managed by DC office executive." He was locked out. He, a senior vice president, was locked out of a client's file. He spent the next week in a fog of pure acidic obsession. He couldn't work. He couldn't sleep. Every time he looked at Chloe, he saw her $10,000 Birkin bag and compared it to the casual way Damian Sterling had stepped out of a $3 million car. His entire world was built on the hierarchy of wealth. He was a success because he had the condo, the car, the beautiful woman. He had won the divorce. But in 1 second on a courthouse step, Damian Sterling had rendered his entire life a pathetic joke. Alice hadn't just traded up. She had ascended to a level he couldn't even comprehend. He started digging. He used his connections to find out about Alice's new life. "She's not his girlfriend." A contact at a rival firm told him over drinks after Mark pried him with expensive whiskey. I've heard rumors. Sterling hired some unknown woman to run his private collection. They call her the Nun. She's brutal. She's been cleaning house, fired half his European staff, discovered 3 high-level forgeries, saved him over $100 million in the last quarter alone. They say she answers to no one but the ghost himself. Mark felt sick. She saved $100 million, his Alice. The woman he'd told was too simple to understand his work. The humiliation was a physical ache. It wasn't just that she was successful. It was that her success was in the one field she had given up for him. He hadn't just divorced her, he had underestimated her. And in his world, underestimation was a fatal sin. Chloe wasn't helping. So she's working for him like an assistant. Why do you even care, Mark? We're rich. We're happy. He's not rich, Chloe. He's wealthy, Mark snapped. You don't understand the difference. What I understand is that you're obsessed with your ex-wife, she shrieked. It's pathetic. The cracks in their perfect relationship were already showing. Chloe was a trophy, but trophies are heavy, and they require constant polishing. Mark was too distracted to provide it. He did something stupid. He found her apartment the one Sterling Industries was leasing for her. A penthouse at the Post Oak, the most exclusive building in the city. He waited in the lobby. When she walked in, flanked by 2 security guards, he stepped out from behind a pillar. Alice. She didn't flinch. Her security tensed, but she held up a hand. Mark, you're trespassing. I wanted to talk. He looked pathetic, and he knew it. Listen, Al. That man, Sterling, he's dangerous. You don't know the things I know. These men, they're users. You're in over your head. He was trying to sound concerned, but it came out as a desperate plea. Alice adjusted the strap of her bag. I'm in over my head, Mark. I'm late for a call with the curator of the Rijksmuseum. You are... What exactly? A mid-level manager worried about his bonus. You're right. I am in over my head. The water's just fine up here. You? You bitch, he spat. You think you're better than me? I don't think anything, Mark, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. I'm just busy. Go home. Enjoy the condo. You earned it, remember? She walked past him. Her security guards, both men built like refrigerators, stared him down until the elevator doors closed. Mark was left alone in the opulent lobby, shaking with a rage so profound it choked him. In Geneva, Alice was in her element. The Sotheby's auction was a symphony of quiet wealth, and she was the conductor. She sat in a private skybox with Damien Sterling advising him. The Picasso is legitimate, she whispered, looking at the data on her tablet. Provenance is solid, but the Monet, the one in lot 34, it's a pass. My team in Paris loves it, Sterling murmured, not taking his eyes off the auctioneer. Your team in Paris is wrong. The brushwork on the water lilies is too precise. Monet's eyesight was failing by 1921. He was painting from memory and emotion. This was painted by someone with perfect vision trying to copy emotion. It's a studio piece, not a masterwork. Not worth the $30 million estimate. Sterling nodded. Pass on lot 34. Later that evening, in the penthouse suite of the Four Seasons, Sterling reviewed her work. You saved me $30 million on the Monet. You made me $50 million on the Rotterdam acquisition by proving our Rembrandt was the original and theirs was the copy. You've made my collection $80 million more valuable in 1 week. He poured 2 glasses of water. He didn't drink alcohol. The settlement from your husband, he said, handing her a glass. $50,000. It's an insulting figure. It's over, Mr. Sterling. I'm just glad to be done with it. We're not done, he said. He insulted you. By extension, he insulted my judgment. I had my legal team, my real legal team, not the divorce attorneys, look into Mr. Anderson's financials. Alice tensed. Sir. He declared his net worth at $4.5 million, Sterling said, pulling up a file on his laptop. His condo, his stock portfolio, his bonuses. It was all there. But it felt light. A man with his spending habits. That Birkin bag for his mistress. The new BMW. The condo. He was leveraged to the hilt, but he was also spending cash. Lots of it. Sterling turned the laptop to face her. My forensic accountants found something. A series of shell corporations based in the Cayman Islands. Small regular transfers. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Over 5 years it adds up. Alice looked at the screen. Her blood ran cold. She recognized the account numbers. Mark was a gambler, she said softly. Not just at work. He had a private poker game, high stakes. He told me it was just blowing off steam with the guys. But he was always so secretive about it. This isn't poker, Alice, Sterling said. This is embezzlement. He's been skimming, taking small percentages off client management fees and diverting them. It's sophisticated, but it's theft. Alice stared at the numbers. She had seen this. She'd found a ledger once hidden in his study. She'd confronted him and he'd told her it was a creative accounting strategy for his taxes and not to worry her pretty little head about it. She'd been so beaten down, so desperate to believe him that she'd let it go. I have the original ledger, she whispered. When I moved out, I took a box of what I thought were my old journals. It's in there. I wanted to be free of him. I didn't want to fight anymore. A rare cold smile touched Damien Sterling's lips. Freedom is one thing, justice is another. He built his kingdom by stealing from his clients and underestimating his wife. Both are unforgivable. He closed the laptop. Send the ledger to my legal team. They'll know what to do. Mark Anderson was on top of the world, or so he told himself. He'd managed to put the Alice Sterling situation out of his mind mostly by pouring himself into his work. He was desperate to land a new massive client. He needed a win to shore up his ego. He was in his glass-walled office berating a junior analyst when his boss, the regional director, appeared at his door. He was flanked by 2 men Mark didn't recognize. They wore dark, boring suits and had the grim expressions of undertakers. Mark, his boss said, his voice strained. These gentlemen are from the SEC. They need to speak with you. Mark's cocky smile vanished. SEC, what is this? Some client complaint? We're not here to talk, Mr. Anderson, the first agent said. We're here for your files, all of them. You can't just, Mark started. We can, the second agent said, holding up a warrant. Your terminal is frozen. You'll be escorted to conference room A. The walk was the longest of Mark's life. The entire trade floor went silent watching him. This was the perp walk, the walk of shame for a finance bro. In conference room A, it got worse. His lawyer Graves was already there looking pale, and at the head of the table sat a woman he didn't recognize, her hair in a severe bun with a laptop open. Mr. Anderson, the SEC agent said, we have evidence of a 5-year pattern of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. What? That's insane, Mark blustered. I'm one of the top earners in this office. The woman at the laptop spoke. Mr. Anderson, my name is Maria Jenkins. I'm the head of forensic accounting for Sterling Industries. For the past 4 weeks, at the request of Mr. Sterling, we have been conducting a private audit of all accounts managed by this office. We found irregularities. We passed those irregularities to the SEC. Mark's blood drained from his face. Sterling. It was Sterling. This is because of my ex-wife, Mark yelled, pointing at Graves. She put him up to this. It's divorce retaliation. This is the ledger you kept in your home study, correct? Ms. Jenkins said, sliding a book across the table. Mark looked at it. It was his. The one Alice had found. The one he thought was long gone. And these, she continued, are the corresponding transfers from Goldman Sachs client accounts into shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. The accounts. They're all in your name. You've stolen an estimated $8.4 million over 5 years. Mark was silent. He was done. "Mr. Anderson," the SEC agent said, standing up, "you're under arrest." It was a blur. They cuffed him. They read him his rights. As they led him through the lobby of the Goldman Sachs Tower, he saw that everyone was watching. His colleagues, his rivals, and then he saw Chloe. She was standing by the security desk, her Birkin bag on the floor. She wasn't crying. She was talking to another executive, a man Mark knew was his direct competitor. She looked at Mark, saw the cuffs, and turned her back. She laughed at something the other man said and walked with him toward the elevators. The trophy had just jumped to a new shelf. As the agents pushed him through the revolving doors, Mark looked out onto the street. And in that moment, in a flash of perfect cruel irony, he saw her, Alice. She wasn't there for him. She was just walking by, holding a cup of coffee, heading into the building next door, the Sterling Industries building. She happened to look over as the agents guided him into the back of an unmarked black car. Their eyes met through the glass. Mark expected to see triumph. He expected to see a smirk. He expected the same mockery he had shown her. He saw none of it. Alice just looked at him, her expression unreadable, and then a flicker of pity. It was the same look she'd given him on the courthouse steps, indifference tinged with a faint sadness. She turned her shoulders straight and walked into her building. That one look broke him more than the handcuffs. The realization that he wasn't even worth her anger. He was just a problem that had been resolved. 1 year had passed. The name Mark Anderson was a ghost. A cautionary tale whispered in the high-stakes bars of downtown Houston and on the trading floors of Wall Street. He was a story about the man who had it all and lost it, a fool who thought he was a king. After a humiliating 6-month trial where his entire life of petty thefts, lies, and emotional abuse was laid bare, he'd pleaded guilty to 8 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He was currently serving a 7-year sentence in a federal low-security prison. He had lost the condo, his reputation, his car, and his freedom. He was by every metric he had ever valued a complete and total failure. The name Alice Hayes, however, was becoming a legend. Tonight was the coronation. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of light against the cool Manhattan night. The unveiling of the Sterling Wing was the single most anticipated cultural event of the decade. It wasn't just a new wing. It was a tectonic shift in the art world. Damian Sterling, the ghost of Wall Street, had finally decided to show his cards, and he had chosen Alice Hayes to be his dealer. Alice stood just inside the arched entryway, a masterpiece of glass and light that bridged the old neoclassical building with the hyper-modern new wing. The wing itself was her design. Her vision, a 3-story atrium of white Italian marble and brushed steel designed to feel less like a museum and more like a cathedral. And tonight it was full. The air hummed with the sound of quiet generational wealth. Billionaires mingled with Pulitzer Prize-winning artists. Politicians kissed the hands of European royalty. The scent of orchids and expensive champagne hung in the air. Alice herself was almost unrecognizable from the woman on the courthouse steps. She wore a simple floor-length gown of midnight blue silk. It was understated elegant and had cost more than Mark's BMW. Her hair, which she used to pull back in a severe apologetic bun, was styled in soft, confident waves. She wore no jewelry save for a pair of teardrop sapphire earrings that Sterling had given her, a signing bonus, he'd called them, after her first month. She was not the mousy, trembling woman he had mocked. She was the Sterling Eye, a name coined by a fawning Vanity Fair profile, a title she had initially hated but now accepted. She was the head curator and president of the Sterling Art Foundation, a $10 billion philanthropic endowment. Her job was no longer just to acquire art, but to preserve it, study it, and share it. She was in this world terrifyingly powerful, and she was at this moment terrified. This was her debut. For the last 18 months she had been a phantom operating in the shadows just like her boss. She'd been in dusty archives in Florence, in high-tech verification labs in Zurich, and intense private auctions in Hong Kong. She had worked 18-hour days 7 days a week, fueled by a ferocious, burning need to prove her own worth to the only person who mattered anymore, herself. Tonight she was stepping into the light. "It is adequate." The voice, quiet as a tomb, came from beside her. Damian Sterling had materialized from the crowd. He was dressed in his uniform, a perfect dark charcoal suit. He didn't look at the crowd. He was looking at the centerpiece of the atrium, the lost Rembrandt they had acquired from the Rotterdam deal, now lit to perfection. "Just adequate, Mr. Sterling?" Alice asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "The lighting on the left hand is half a degree off," he murmured. "It's hitting the signet ring, but it's missing the texture of the cuff. See to it." "I'll have it fixed," Alice said, making a mental note. "Good." He finally turned his steel-gray eyes to her. "The Board of Trustees is ecstatic. The Times is calling it a triumph of New World philanthropy. You've done well, Ms. Hayes." From Damian Sterling, "You've done well" was the equivalent of a marching band and a ticker-tape parade. "Thank you, sir," she said. "Do not thank me. You executed the strategy." He nodded toward the crowd. "Now go. This is your evening. Mingle with the vipers. I'll be observing." He stepped back into an unlit alcove, a ghost at his own party, and simply watched. Alice took a deep breath and stepped into the main hall. She was immediately swarmed. Donors, critics, artists, all wanting a piece of the Sterling eye. She handled them with a grace she hadn't known she possessed, discussing 17th century pigment composition with one and endowment strategy with another. She was fluent, confident, and precise. Then she saw her. Across the room, standing beside a much older, much paunchier man with a politician's smile, was Chloe. She was poured into a glittering, garish gold dress, her blonde hair piled high. She was still beautiful, and she was still holding a Birkin bag, a new one in bright crocodile pink. She had landed on her feet just as Alice knew she would. Chloe was a survivor, a trophy that knew her own value on the market. Their eyes met across the room. Alice saw a flash of emotions on Chloe's face. First confusion. "Who is that?" Then dawning recognition, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. Chloe's painted-on smile faltered. She saw Alice's dress, her poise, the wing of a museum that was essentially her project. Chloe looked down at her own garish dress, at the aging man whose arm she was holding, and for a single beautiful second she looked cheap. Alice didn't smirk. She didn't glare. She didn't give her the satisfaction of any emotion at all. She simply held her gaze, gave a small, polite, and utterly dismissive nod, and turned back to the museum director she was speaking to. It was a small victory, but it was sweet. She was so focused on this small triumph that she didn't see the real threat until he was right in front of her. "Ms. Hayes, a pleasure." His name was Julian Thorne. He was the chief curator of the MoMA, a man from old money with a patrician accent and a deep-seated contempt for anyone who hadn't inherited their position. He saw the art world as his exclusive club, and she was the nouveau riche upstart with a billionaire's checkbook crashing the gates. In his eyes, she wasn't a curator. She was a glorified personal shopper. He was Mark Anderson, but with a Ph.D. from Cambridge. "Mr. Thorne," Alice said, her voice cool, "I'm so glad you could make it. I hope you're enjoying the exhibit." Thorne, flanked by a small parasitic entourage of critics and reporters, smiled a thin, condescending smile. "It is certainly an exhibit," he said, letting the word hang. "So much volume. Mr. Sterling has certainly been a busy bee. One wonders if there was any actual strategy behind the acquisitions, or if it was simply a matter of, 'I'll take one of those and one of those.'" The reporter scribbled. This was blood in the water. "The strategy," Alice said, her voice perfectly even, "is truth. We acquire pieces that have been lost, forgotten, or misattributed. We use Mr. Sterling's resources to restore them and give them back to the public. Like the Donatello in the South Gallery, the one your own museum declared a 19th century imitation." Thorne's face tightened. She had just very publicly reminded him that she had bought a piece he rejected, which her team had since authenticated, making it one of the most valuable sculptures in the world. "A lucky guess, my dear," Thorne sneered. "A blind squirrel finds a nut and all that. But luck runs out." He turned and pointed his long, pale finger aimed at the centerpiece, the Rembrandt. "This piece, for instance," he said, his voice rising, projecting to the crowd. "The lost Rembrandt. A bold claim. My colleagues at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam are deeply skeptical. They've had their own version, the Rotterdam Rembrandt, for 50 years. They believe it is the original." He stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "They believe, Mr. Sterling, and by extension you simply bought the provenance, paid off a few experts to create a paper trail. A costly, embarrassing mistake. You've built your entire wing around a fake Ms. Hayes, and tomorrow the Times is running a front-page story on that very skepticism." This was it. The ambush. The crowd went silent. The reporters' pens were flying. This wasn't just a challenge. It was an execution. He was accusing her in front of the entire art world of being a fraud. He was trying to do to her exactly what Mark had done, mock her, dismiss her, and paint her as a stupid, unqualified woman who was in over her head. She looked past Thorne's smug face across the vast atrium and saw Damian Sterling in the shadows. He was watching. He made no move to help. This was her test. Alice turned her back to Thorne and looked at the painting. She looked at it for a long, silent 10 seconds. She let the tension build. The only sound was the distant click of a camera. When she turned back, she was no longer nervous. She was a different person. She was the Sterling Eye. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and cutting. "You're right to be skeptical. I was too." She walked toward the painting and the crowd parted for her. Thorne had no choice but to follow. She stopped directly in front of it. "You and your colleagues in Amsterdam are correct," she said. "The Rotterdam piece is brilliant. The brushwork is exquisite. The composition is identical. For 50 years it has been without question considered the original." Thorne smiled. "So you admit it. But it's a copy." Alice interrupted, her voice like steel. "A masterful contemporary copy painted by a student in his studio. And do you know how we know?" Thorne was silent. Alice pointed to the painted cuff on the subject's left wrist. "We know because of this. You've seen the painting, Mr. Thorne, but you haven't studied it. My team and I spent 4 months on this piece. We ran mass spectrometry, X-ray fluorescence, and infrared reflectography. The Rotterdam piece is painted on a standard oak panel, which is correct for the period." She tapped the wall label next to the painting. "This one, however, is painted on a panel of mahogany imported from the New World, a wood that Rembrandt was known to favor for his most important commissions, but which his students could almost never afford. But that's not the proof. That's just a hint." She looked directly at the New York Times reporter. "The proof is in the mistakes." She motioned for a museum attendant who handed her a tablet. She tapped the screen and a large monitor on the wall lit up, showing an infrared image of the painting. "This," Alice said, "is the pentimento, the underdrawing, the artist's original sketch which he painted over. Look at the subject's right hand. In the underdrawing he was holding a pair of gloves. In the final painting the gloves are gone and his hand is resting on the hilt of his sword." She zoomed in, her voice resonating with absolute, unshakable authority. "A forger, Mr. Thorne, copies the final product. They copy what they see. The Rotterdam painting. It has no pentimento. It was painted perfectly all at once. It's a brilliant copy of this, our final version." She turned to face the stunned crowd. "Only the master changes his mind. The Rotterdam piece is a copy. This is the original. This is the process. This is the truth." She then delivered the final devastating blow. She looked back at Thorne, her expression not triumphant, but almost pitying, the same look she had given Mark as he was forced into the police car. "My full analysis, including the spectral data and the IR scans, was sent to the Rijksmuseum 2 days ago. We received their official retraction of their original claim this morning. They will be co-authoring our paper on the discovery." She looked at the Times reporter. I believe their official statement is being released to your editor right about now. You may want to check your email. Your front page story is going to need a new headline. Julian Thorne's face was chalk white. He had been so sure. He had been so arrogant. He had been academically, forensically, and publicly gutted. He didn't say a word. He just turned his entourage melting away from him and walked humiliated out of the wing. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. Then it broke. The room erupted in thunderous, sustained applause. It wasn't just polite. It was a roar. Alice stood by the Rembrandt, her hand resting lightly on the wall label. She had done it. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't cried. She had used her mind. She had used the knowledge they'd told her was useless. She had won. Later, after the applause had finally died down, she walked to the podium to give her official remarks. Her earlier nerves were gone. She owned this room. She owned her life. Art, she said, her voice clear and strong, is not about possession. It's not about an asset on a balance sheet or a trophy for a wall. It is about preservation. It's about a conversation across centuries. It's about finding the truth in the canvas even when that truth has been painted over. She smiled a small, genuine smile that lit up her face. For too long, this world has been dominated by those who see art as just another way to prove their power. Tonight, we change that. The Sterling Wing is open not as a monument to wealth, but as a commitment to the truth, to the stories that were almost lost. The applause was, if possible, even louder. As the party began to wind down, the young, eager reporter from the New York Times, the one who had just gotten the biggest story of her career, found Alice by the window. "Ms. Hayes, that was incredible. An incredible achievement. You've come out of nowhere in the last 18 months. You've completely reshaped the auction world. What's your secret?" Alice took a sip of champagne, looking out over the lights of New York. She thought back to the courthouse, to the smell of stale coffee, to the feel of Mark's dismissive gaze, to the moment she thought her life was over, that she was worthless. "There's no secret," Alice said, her voice warm. "I just stopped letting other people define my worth. It turns out my pretty little head had a lot more in it than anyone, including myself, realized." The reporter scribbled furiously. Across the room, standing alone by a 17th-century Vermeer, was Damien Sterling. He was, as always, observing. He watched Alice hold the room not with threats or volume, but with quiet, unshakable competence. He caught her eye. He didn't smile. A smile was too much. But he gave her a single slow nod. The highest possible praise from the ghost of Wall Street. It was not a nod from a boss to an employee. It was not a nod from a man to a woman he had saved. It was a nod of respect, from one master to another. And that's the story of Alice Hayes. She learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so magnificent that your past becomes completely irrelevant. Mark tried to break her, but he only succeeded in removing himself as the single biggest obstacle to her success. She didn't need a billionaire to save her. She just needed an opportunity to save herself. What did you think of Alice's transformation? Was Mark's downfall just, or was it a cold, calculated move by Sterling? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Most importantly, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and ring that bell. We post new stories every single week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening.